One of the best-known quotes attributed to Benjamin Franklin comes from a letter he wrote to Jean-Baptiste Leroy in 1789 after the adoption of the U.S. Constitution. Franklin wrote, "Our new Constitution is now established and has an appearance that promises permanency. But in this world," he wrote, "nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes." As the coronavirus continues to rage in our country and the world, the media report daily on the latest number of deaths, and the number in some areas is staggering. For me, the most tragic reports are of those individuals who die alone. Because of safety guidelines, family and friends are not permitted to be with them. That means that the dying persons are isolated in ICU units or designated areas in hospital wings. And most heartrending to me are those who are lying in beds in nursing homes, where family at the very best can only catch a glimpse of them through windows while standing outside the facility. The biblical passage that is most comforting to me at these times is Psalms 23:4. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." There are a couple of points from this psalm that are particularly relevant in the midst of this coronavirus pandemic. One is the reminder, as Benjamin Franklin said, that death is certain. It is unavoidable. The psalmist writes, "Even though," not if, "I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, but even though I walk through that shadowy valley." You see, it's not optional. It's inevitable. And secondly, is the assurance that we do not need to fear death. Again, the psalmist writes, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." How can you and I walk through the valley of death unafraid? It is because the God from whom we were given life, the God in whose image we were made, promises to walk through that valley with us. The psalmist writes, "I will fear no evil, for you are with me." In his book, Abba's Child, author Brennan Manning writes about an encounter he had with a dying man. The man's daughter had asked Brennan if he would consider visiting her dad. She explained that her dad was dying of cancer and no one had been to see him, and he was alone. And so when visiting the man, Brennan said that he noticed the old man was propped up in bed with a couple of pillows and an empty chair seated right beside his bed. The man told Brennan that when he felt alone and needed to talk to someone or to pray, he would imagine Jesus sitting in that empty chair by his bed. "And I talk to him at least 2 hours every day," he told Brennan. "And if my daughter saw me talking to an empty chair, she'd think I'd lost my mind." A few days later, the old man's daughter called Brennan to let him know that her dad had died. And she said, "You know, it was the strangest thing. When I found my dad, he had somehow managed to move himself so he could lay his head on that empty chair by his bed. Strange." Brennan didn't find it strange at all, for he knew that her dad had placed his head in the lap of God and was assured he didn't die alone. This is the same assurance the psalmist proclaims in those words, "I will fear no evil, because you are with me." I wonder, is it reassuring to you to know that whenever you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, that you will not walk through that valley alone. That's something to consider.